Howdy, folks. It's Meandering Mike in the Man Cave of Madness. It's the middle of the afternoon, and we are doing another of our segment called Compare and Contrast. We are looking at two games by Kerry Anderson that should be somewhat similar. Moon Base Clavius, this came out in 1982 from Task Force Games, and Clavius, which is self-published by Kerry Anderson through his microgame design group in 2014. So we're going to take a look at both of these and talk about the similarities and the differences. Kerry Anderson was recently on the Chit Show by Dan Pincaldi and Ardwolf on Ardwolf's Lair's channel. And it's one of the games that he talked about having, it was his first published game, I believe. He had tried to shop around some game designs before that, but Task Force Games published his game, but they changed some aspects. And so this later version, he sort of corrected what he felt were poor decisions to change the game. So this is obviously punched, used. I have not played this. I bought this used, but back in the day, I owned a number of Task Force games. This was not one of them that I had back then, but I did play a lot of Starfire and Starfleet Battles and Intruder, other things from Task Force games. Basically what you'd call a micro game. These were about $5.95 to $6.95 US dollars. I do not see a price tag on these. Sometimes they had a printed price on the cover. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can more easily see the whole thing. So I don't have to constantly shift it up and down. 3 scenarios. Playing time about 30 minutes to 1 hour. Complexity moderate. It has 108 die cut counters, as we see here. So we've been punched. We've got American forces in blue and Russian forces. They should call them Soviets, but they're calling them the Russians. Because at the time, this is set in a hypothetical 1996. It came out in 82. So obviously we didn't have a bunch of wars on the the moon ever since then. So their vision of the future was a little more aggressively armed and active than what actually happened. Thank goodness. Pretty simple. See that very well. There's 2 numbers. There's a combat strength and a movement allowance. And it does say SMD. Some of these counters here were registration a little bit off, and it's cutting off on the bottom. So it's SMG, which is submachine gun, and RF stands for rifleman. The American troops, INF for infantry, and I believe laser rifle is their stronger units. Yeah, here we go. LR, standing for laser rifle. There's nuclear mortars, and I believe the Soviets also have nuclear mortars, but the Americans have some regular mortars in addition to their nuclear mortars. Let's take a look here at the map. So a lot of Task Force game maps back in that day were pretty bland. So we have here, basically black and white with some red in it. These black and white being able to make various gray scales. So not a lot of color. Certainly not a full 4-color process. Right, this looks like, 17 by 22, I would guess. Does it say on here? Game map sheet. It does not say here the physical size of it. there are 108 playing pieces. Bombardment strength. There's also self-propelled batteries, which I believe those guys only shoot at half strength at range. There's some kind of rule like that or something. I'm not going to look too much in detail the rules, but I'm going to examine, the difference in the components, and talk about the rule change, or the basic rule change that the company made, Task Force Games made on their own, which, when you bring a design to a company, very often you're turning it over to them and they can do what they want with it, unless your contract says otherwise. Good companies, smart companies, will vet everything with the designer and make sure they work together. But some companies don't do that. I think it's a huge mistake. To not get some good agreement. But sometimes the company does know better what their audience is, and maybe they've got some highly skilled game developers, and there might be a good reason to change something. And sometimes designers are too busy, or they're just done with it. They've basically thrown it over the fence and say, "Here, take it. I'm going to get my 5 or 10% royalty, and I don't want to spend any more time on it. Do it with what you will." But that's not usually for the best in the long run. All right, so I'm trying to look here for... Yeah, why isn't there a basic sequence of play spelled out very cleanly and clearly? Am I missing? Maybe I'm not. There's got to be a page in between here. Okay, there we are. A new one's in here somewhere. Game sequence outline. Okay, and here is the gist of it. The issue. Combat phase, then a movement phase. The design, as submitted by Kerry Anderson, was a move and then shoot. Movement phase, then a combat phase. They decided to change it to combat first, then movement. The problem with that, where you have to shoot first and then move, is that allows the player that's on defense to basically run and run and run, but get full as the attacker's moving up. They're not in range, they're moving into range, trying to get into range to assault at close range, but they don't get to shoot yet. The defender can shoot and back off to safety and play a cat and mouse game and run and do stuff. Now, obviously, if there's certain things that you must hold, you can't do that. But if you don't have to forever hold everything all the time, and you can maneuver, and it's like, well, okay, we're going to run and hit and run, and now that you're trying to hold something, now we can come back and maybe try to surround you or something. It makes for very unrealistic stuff. So a strict move and then shoot is almost universally better than a shoot then move. Now, some kind of hybrid where there can be shooting and then some moving and then some shooting and some opportunity fire and something in between, some kind of chit pull activation, and, do you move half and then can shoot at full, or if you shoot and want to scoot, then you can only shoot at, say half and then, or something. There's all sorts of ways to do that, but I will bet you 95% of the time, if you find a game that has combat, then movement, you're going to find huge problems in the game system that people can milk and do unrealistic things. All right, so there's a monorail system. That's these red things. You got Moon Base. These are all craters, these big things here. So they've got their bases inside. Some are out on the surface. Now, my understanding, I have not played this game, like I said, but the combat results table is kind of weird. where it's very dependent on attacking strength points versus a terrain type, and the strength of the units don't matter. It's like the individual units you're shooting at don't have a defense strength. It's purely the defense of the terrain that they're in, which is kind of weird. I mean, it's one thing to have a defense strength of a unit modified by the terrain, but to not have any, the type of your unit that you're shooting at not mattering is kind of weird. All right, so this is weird. Movement cost per hex. So there's a movement cost to move out. So crater walls are kind of expensive. Everything else, rough. Wait a minute. Crater plane. Everything else out here is rough. The surface is rough. Okay, so these are all 2. These are 3 movement cost, and in the crater plane is all 1. That sounds weird. Colonies are 1. Mining facilities are 1. So out here, transport system has special rules. Obviously, you got to, be on the monorail or use the monorail. You got to control probably both sides of it. But wow, is that really true? Crater plane. Assuming the shading is correct. I mean, sometimes like, oh, is that, should this be 1 and this be 2? That crater, the bottom, you would think that this here would all be flatter, right? And then maybe the bottom of the crater, might have a lot of accumulated dust or some, rockiness. So that'll be weird to see how that compares to the new version, to see if that's the same also. So I'm going to quickly try to find out here the explanation of that combat system. I'm not going to go into detail, but combat resolution. Okay, terrain plays an important part. A very important part. Terrain in the hex is occupied. The attacker has no effect. It's always what's in the defender's hex. No. Most advantageous type if there's more than one type. Attacking player totals the attack strength of all non-nuclear mortars. Divide by the number of defending units. Round all fractions down. To this total, add the bombardment strength of nuclear bombarding the hex. Okay, because nuclear mortars basically is not being spread out and divide. It's hitting everyone equally in the hex. Whereas a normal mortar is spread around. Whereas same with direct fire. Now, this is saying that if you have 2 guys defending in a hex, they each get half the attack against them. You can't concentrate on one guy. Unless there's some kind of rule for targeting particular guys to override that. Desperation attacks. Engineer optional rule. Which units may attack? Adjacent. Units and 2 more. Wait. So any units with ranged capabilities. Okay, how do we tell which are ranged capabilities? Normally you'd have a range on a counter, but there's only 2 numbers on each of these guys. So the self-propelled battery has them horizontally. So they have a number here on the left in parentheses and then a number here. Whereas these have a number here and here. This is supposed to be attack strength and movement. So these mortars being able to move just as fast as infantry is kind of weird. I guess you can pick them up and move them around. Do they have... oh, wait. Did I remember reading that these are all units are assumed to be flying? So, like, these guys have jetpacks or something? Which, if that's the case, the terrain movement cost makes no sense. Or am I, in my brain, mixing up another game? Yes, I do not like the organization of these rules. Movement. Area movement and ground movement. Go see 5.3. Sorry, kind of rambling through this here, but terrain effects. Self-propelled batteries use ground movement. So those self-propelled batteries are big tracked vehicles that have a 4 movement allowance that move on the ground. All other units use air movement. Individual sustained flight packs. All right, so here we go. Air units expend 1 movement point per hexander no matter what the type of terrain, except through the monorail system. So that is what this meant here. Movement cost per hex only for self-propelled batteries. Now, it really should say ground movement cost, because let's say you want to enhance this game. You want to add some different unit types, right? You're going to, who has not done that with the game in the past? Like, hey, I'm going to create my own variants, right? So you might create some other ground unit that doesn't fly, and therefore it's like, okay, this is going to be the ground cost. Whereas everyone else it costs 1. So all those infantry guys have got their jetpacks and their movement allowance is 1, and they have a 10 movement allowance, including the mortar units. So they've got their little jetpacks and stuff. Okay, so that explained ground and air movement. Now, what about range? And I want to get back to stacking and that whole notion of it's being divided, So if you have 2 guys instead of 1 defending in a hex, each guy is getting half as much against him. And if there's 3 guys in a hex, they're taking a third. So, I mean, I get that normally when you have more defenders together, you can shoot back and you can suppress the enemy, as you're firing. But if it's his turn and he's attacking, and your ability to do anything when you're outnumbered is really bad. That your chance to hurt anything back if the attacker, say, is coming in stacked up, and he's got 3 guys in his hex and they move up next to the defender. The defender, so it's whether you're on the attacker, that stacking up is huge. Obviously, there's those nuclear mortars that'll blast everyone equally, but we gotta figure out what this number means, right? So a nuclear mortar by himself, crater wall, plain, rough, trans, is that the monorail transport? 2, 3. This is probably a to-hit roll. Okay. So I think I remember hearing something about rolling like 2 dice or something to see if you get a hit. So it's or a hit to kill kind of thing. That bombardment. So it's the difference of bombardment. Units with ranged Fire capable. Which units may attack? Units in 2 or more different hexes may combine their attack strength to attack in a single, if they're all adjacent or in range. Okay, that's fine, but you'd rather be as stacked together as much as you can to spread out the effect of the counterfire, unless you're facing massed nuclear mortars, in which case when you stack up, he's going to be able to hit you all. So cat and mouse game of who's got the most nuclear mortars and can get their enemy caught in the nuclear mortar range first. And where does it say which guys are ranged units? Did it say way back here? The playing pieces, movement allowance, bombardment strength. I'm not seeing it. Well, that's not critical for our resolution purpose at this point, where we're trying to look at the combat systems between the two. Obviously, to play the game, I got to know which guy those guys are ranged, and I think it's really bad that it's not obvious on the counters. That you either have a range number, or you have some kind of asterisk, or you got some kind of a stripe. Some indicate. I mean, obviously the mortars are probably ranged, but shouldn't the laser rifles be ranged? You know, are all those infantry 1 hex range or not? Maybe it's just the infantry are 1 hex and the nuclear mortars and the self-propelled batteries are ranged. But where does it say in that? And why isn't there an indication on the counter? Separate terrain. A self-propelled is considered a separate terrain type for purposes of defense? Let's see, wait a minute. They have their own defense column? They do. So regardless of the terrain that the self-propelled battery is, that you actually, so there is a weird exception. Everything else, you roll based on your strength, divided across units for the terrain. But self-propelled batteries, it's just the fact that it's a self-propelled battery. Alrighty. Self-propelled batteries may use a limited type of ranged fire. Fires at adjacent strength, it uses full printed combat strength. If it fires at 2 hexes away, it uses half its combat strength with 5. It may not fire at a range of over 2. Okay, so those are range units. Are they the only range units? What does it say about nuclear mortars, self-propelled batteries? This is weird. So section 10 is self-propelled batteries. But rule 10.2 is talking about nuclear mortars. Oh, against self-propelled batteries. So where are they talking? Nuclear mortars. 12 individuals on 3 nuclear mortars. Bombard adjacent and non-adjacent in accordance with the rules on bombardment 8.2 for a range of 1 or 2 hexes. Okay, so yeah, again, dear designers / publishers, make it very obvious from a counter if a unit has a ranged capability. Period. End of sentence. Do not make anyone have to know which unit types are ranged or not. You know, having to recognize from a silhouette. Now, in standard NATO symbols, you've got like a dot for artillery, or even, you know, armored artillery, mobile artillery, you know, the same thing. You can have the oval and a dot. And that's artillery. So you could say, you know, artillery are ranged, and you could tell them that. But based on a silhouette, no, don't do that. Have a range on there. And again, the same thing. If you were, oh, I want long range batteries of some kind, you know, and you might have a 3 or a 4 hex range, you should be saying, look at the range. Here's where the range number is. Blah, blah, blah. some indicator of what's a ground unit versus flying and all that stuff. You know, the movement allowance. You know, you could say, you know, any movement allowance above a certain rating is flying, or you could put it in a box, or you could underline it, or in, you know, whatever. You can easily, without too overcarding the counters, have some indication of what's ground movement or not, what's ranged attack or not, etc. Okay, so that was that pet peeves. I'm still looking for that actual resolution. What's that number here? So we gotta go back. Combat resolution. Okay, meandering. Wow, we're up to 25 minutes. Sorry, folks. But yeah, but we're digging in as we do. Compare and contrast. This is not like just a normal unboxing. We're not just, you know, we are looking at the system and we're going to compare the two and looking at the important nuts and bolts, kind of analyzing the designs. So that's what we're all about here in compare and contrast. Cross index, attack value, the defender's terrain type. This will yield the number the attacker must roll on 2 6-sided die to eliminate each defending unit. If you roll the listed number or less. Okay, so this is one of those ones where it's a target to hit number, trying to roll equal or lower than, which in many games, this is the modern way to do it is rolling high should be good. You want to roll high damage, you want to roll high to hit or something. It's like, so having a target to hit number, we have to at least roll that or higher, you know. And so this is that, roll that or less. So the higher the number, the more likely you're to hit. So the more combined strength you have here, you have to roll this number or less. So you can never hit automatically. So shooting at guys in the planes or on the monorail, the transport network, 11 or less, you might miss on a 12. So it's still 1 out of 36. And here, you know, shooting someone in the crater plane, the crater floor, with 1 to 4 strength points, you only have a 3 or less, 2 or 3 on 2 6-sided dice, which is 3 out of 36. It's a 1 in 12 chance to hit. So interestingly enough, if you had 1 4-strength unit, so the Soviet rifleman is 5 strength. Let's get again. It's 5 strength. So they're on this chart here. They would need a 3 or less to shoot a guy in the plains or in the rough. On the crater wall, they would need a 2 or less. If there was 2 guys in the square, a single 5-strength rifleman would divide his strength in half against each and would round down, according to what it said, would have 2 strength points. Well, against a guy in the rough, you can't hit, which is kind of odd. They don't give it the 2. They say, no, we're not going to give you any chance at all to hit. Pretty weird. But against the guy in the plane, so shooting against 1 or 2 guys stacked in the plane of the crater, it'd still be 3. Someone on the crater wall, 1 guy he could hit on snake eyes, but 2 guys splitting it up, they couldn't hit. So obviously a single Russian rifle unit, I'm not sure what those are, if those are individual men or small squads or what. I'll have to go back and look in here what it said. So you need to, oh my God, even though that's stacking up, it's like 2 full-strength guys against the rough is still a 3. So 3 of them, 3 guys at a 15, you need a 6 or less. So a guy out here in the open in the rough, 3 rifle units, could hit on a 6 or less. Yep. So that's 15/36 chance. But if there was two of them, two guys out there dividing this in half, it would be 7.5 down to here. You'd only hit, you'd roll against each guy, but you'd have a 3. So you'd have 336 instead of here. A 6 or less is 15/36. Yeah, I do not like that at all. That does not make any good sense to me whatsoever. Wow. Okay, so the good Russian dudes, the Soviets, we should call them 8s, the submachine guns. Let's see, 2 of them are still only 16, 3 are 24. So at 3, they're way up here. Okay, so 3 of the submachine guns compared to 3 rifle units, they're at 9 or less. And if there's 2 defenders, you're at 12 units. You're only at a 4, though. So a 4 or less is a 1 in 6 chance, because that's 6/36. Remember, there's a snake eyes is 1/36 chance. Rolling a 3 is 3/36. Excuse me, 2/36. So rolling a 3 or less is 3/36, and the chance to roll a 4 is 3/36. And so to roll a 4 or less is 6/36. There's a 1 in 6 chance on 2 dice of rolling a 4 or less. And so a stack of 3 8-strength Soviet submachine gunners shooting at a stack of 2 American units out in the open, but what they're calling rough, which is less open than the crater plain. Yeah, your odds are exceedingly bad. This is just a really weird combat system. Can have a lot of crappy dice rolls unless you are totally gang-banging single units. So it's all about gang-banging single units. Now, if we look at, if you do stack up, and they're shooting nuclear mortars hit everybody. However, again, let's say like if you're sitting, so even the worst place, the plane of the crater, all right, 1 nuclear mortar could hit everyone in the square, rolling for each one on a 3 or less. So that's still only 1 in 12 chance. 3/36 to roll a 3 or less. 2 of them together, 8. That's 4. There's only 1 in 6 chance. If you had a full 3 nuclear mortars shooting at a stack of 3 guys in the worst, well, obviously the worst terrain is on the transport network. You don't want to stay in the transport network. That's bad. Don't do that. You're going to get yourself killed. 12. So 5 or less. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Adding 4. That's 10/36. All right, so that's less than a third chance. You're all rolling for each one, but it's still having to roll a 5 or less. 2, 3, 4, 5 on 2 dice. You'd roll for each one. So your odds are you're maybe going to hit one of them. You might get like a 2, but good chance you're still not going to hit any at all. So obviously you need multiple stacks of stacks shooting at his stacks. But how easy is that going to be to do in a game where you shoot, then move? You've got to be like surrounding dudes, so on their turn, they can't move. I'm assuming you can't move through an enemy, but these are flying units, so why the heck couldn't I move through an enemy unit? Technically, how does some flying guys stop me, when it's not a huge number of guys? Does it actually say? Each playing piece, Soviet units, game scale. Each turn represents 4.5 hours of real time. Represents attack strength. Does it not say? Somewhere in there it said that the nuclear mortars represented 3 guns and 12 people. What does submachine gun rifle, infantry, laser rifle? Still, these are, each hex is 17 miles across. So there's no way they should technically, in real life, be able to block you. You should be able to fly right through them. Hex pays 1 or more movement costs, and a unit will pay 1 for every time. So to enter each type, effect units may be moved in any direction, common direction, but once the unit has moved in the move phase, it may not move again. Restrictions. You may never expend more, blah, 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 may, blah, 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 blah. Okay, a unit may enter or move through hexes containing other friendly units, but not in movement in violation of stack limits. However, a unit may never enter a hex containing an enemy unit or units, which I call baloney. Okay, if these guys are, if the mortar unit has 12 guys, maybe the infantry unit has 10 times that many. But if it's a 17-mile hex, I contend that maybe you should be having in-hex come. I don't know. That's my rambling design. Okay, let's not go into that too much. We've looked at the implications of this. We've got some good idea. We haven't actually tried it, but the fact that you have to stack up all this strength to get good odds to hit, not based on the kind of units that are in there, except for self-propelled batteries. All right, so when you're hitting a self-propelled battery, you will do it based on that, regardless of the terrain. So self-propelled batteries could stay and move around using this transportation network and defend better. You could use them, given that you can't enter an enemy hex, you could actually form like a line on the transportation network with self-propelled batteries and have your good defense and prevent them from. So I don't know. Sounds all very abusable to me. The way the shoot then move, this kind of combat, the weird stacking stuff. But so that's this game here. I want to quickly. I'm not going to look up what the exact movement effect of monorail. There's different scenarios. There's the initial Soviet attack with, looks like, 42, almost the full force. There's 45 Russian units and 63 American units, because there's 108 counters, so there's only 45. So even if the Russians are in attack, they're way outnumbered. Maybe the Soviets can keep getting reinforcements after reinforcements. Let's see here. 35, 45. They get all their units, and the Americans have 43. Good luck. Inf. Now they got the 6 strength imp. They don't have any of the Marines. All right. But they have still 42 units. They're on defense. So it must capture 4 forts and 1 colony, or all 5 colonies. Now, what was the terrain effect here? What's the fort and what's the colony? I think these things with the little crosshatches are a mining facility. So there's round dots. Oh, wait. Is that hexagonal instead of round? Wow, that's hard to distinguish. It was just a big red blob. Yes, round, red, not hexagonal, it's octagonal. So I would go through and I would mark these myself. I would put some mark in the middle of these octahedral, because it really, at a distance, they're about the same size. I can see now this has an edge to it, an edge. All right, so those, all 5 colonies are within the Clavius crater. All right. And the forts are spread out there. So the Soviets, the Russians as they're calling them, we should call them the Soviets, at that period of time. Well, actually, technically, oddly, presently, the Soviet Union had collapsed in the early 90s. So by 1996, they were the Russians, but they did not know that in 1982. So I will take back calling them the Soviets. But at the time the game was designed, the idea was that this would have been, it does say Soviets here, but on the counter mix it says the Russians. So they're not being consistent. So anyway, let's not go into that. They have the Siege of Clavius, the Marines land, and the campaign game. All right. So compare and contrast. So this is a print-on-demand version I got from Kerry Anderson. I did not get the print-and-play version that you can print yourself. I don't like to futz with that stuff. I don't have a big printer that can print big sheets, and I don't like the idea of trying to make my own counters and all that kind of stuff. So even though these counters are kind of... they're on very soft, kind of light cardboard. So they're not, but these are tiny 1/2-inch counters. So you don't need them to be really thick and sturdy. I wish they were bigger. I wish they were a little bigger, but you know, these are so simple. We also notice here off the bat that they change it so they have, you know, a left-right orientation instead of that vertical orientation that most units had, except for the self-propelled batteries. Self-propelled batteries show as a 10-4. Aha! You can see here a little tiny superscript, which is the range, 2. Now, they didn't put that on the nuclear mortars. Oh, I get it. It's in parenthesis because it's halved at 2. So they're explaining, you know, at point-blank range, they will shoot for 10, and at 2, they are... So I still would have liked some indication that the nuclear mortars... Now, this is something new. On RB 010... it looks like a platform of some kind. Let's look at the thing here. All right, so the rules, instead of, you know, a fold in half, you know, because this is 8.5 by 11 folded in half, right? So instead, it's just a full vertical 8.5 by 11. Okay, this is advanced rules. So it's you know, one, so they don't even have to staple anything. They've got the basic rules and advanced rules. Original Clavius was designed in circa 1980. This is a set of rules intended to update the original design. Okay, this is what you can do to say, hey, for this guy here, here's what I intended this to be. Oxygen depletion marker. Rocket bus. That's what those things are. Zero says rocket bus. So maybe all the infantry don't fly, and instead they take the rocket bus. And right, move and combat. An oxygen check phase. Militia formation, move and combat. So that was what the original design was. All right, so obviously this version is the same thing. Move and combat. Move and combat. Landing craft. Okay, what's the difference between a lot more counters here too. So limited to 108. They've got I'm not sure what those are supposed to be. Okay, they're not back printed at all, so it's all one-sided. Oh, they got engineers. In the original version, there was one headquarters unit for the Russians and one engineer unit. Rifles, submachine guns, infantry, laser, LC, landing craft. So they're an interesting magenta color. U.S. Marine Corps 88th Special Forces Battalion. They have landing craft. All right. Those are the only... Ooh, 10 strength. Yeah, 10 strength. So the submachine guns for the Russians are 8. The rifles are 5. The nuclear mortars are 5. That's all the same. RF, more rifles, submachine gun, rocket buses. Both sides have rocket buses. We'll have to see how that works at some point. But don't need to know. So I do not know what these are. We will obviously maybe see destroyed transportation line or depot. So you kill off stuff. Let's look here. This comes in two map sheets. So what will are these the same size hexes? So wait a minute, the orientation, that's here, it's this way. All right, so it is it the same size or is it slightly different? This is a tiny bit wider. So obviously you trim one of these to tuck underneath. So you trim that edge. So I'm going to tilt this down so you can see more of that better. So obviously nicer graphics, the color. They could have stuffed in the corner here a train. So here they're showing all these more pockmarked stuff. So the notion that this is rough out here and this crater plane is a little more protected, I guess. You got the crater walls, so stuff coming in. It's not as peppered. That's probably why they have their bases in there normally. Trajectory of stuff that enter and orbit the moon and come down would tend to be at a not a vertical straight down angle. But I would like to have seen on the map the train key. Coulda, shoulda, woulda fit that on there somewhere in a corner easily. Oh, I don't see it. Did I miss? Is there a thing here? Is there a player aid card? Oh, no. Here we are. All right. So there we go. So rough is this gray. Now, before that was white. Dark gray, light gray. So now the dark brown is the crater wall. The gray inside here is crater plane with depots, which could be out or in. And here they show movement, ground/air. So air is 1 for everybody. 2, 3, 1, 1, 1. These are mines, so they definitely made the symbols much more distinct. The difference between a colony, which is a gray building with, well, wait a minute. There are only those 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's only oh, this is one here too. Fortunately, yeah, that kind of cuts off a little bit. So there's 1 or 2 orange dots with a gray or silver building. That's colony. And then a depot is just the gray building by itself, and the mining facilities are much more obvious now. Okay, so it lists some effects here. So totally new combat results table. Combat, the dice roll here on the side looks like a plus or minus. So it's 2 to 12 that can go up to 14 or down to a 0. This is a strength across the top. And this is obviously a number of hits. So instead of having cross-referencing the strength to a number of the terrain, you now have terrain differences here. Crater plane, -2 to attackers and defenders' dice rolls. So if you're down there in the plane of the plane, you're both getting a penalty. In the rough, there's no effect. So that's very weird to me. The crater plane. No, wait a minute. Minus again is hitting better and harder. So you actually are being much more potent. The crater wall, the defender fires first, and the attacker has to add to their die roll. I mean, it's harder to hit. Now, again, that's... they kept the orientation that low is good instead of high. I would have switched it to high is good. So a bonus, a +2, is a good thing, and a minus is not. Well, when you're rolling to see your strength against them to see how much damage you do, you wanting to roll low, and a minus is good for you, and it's counterintuitive. So don't do that. There's no reason to do it that way. You can always restructure the direction of these things to make sense. Bonuses should be a bonus, and a penalty should look at penalty. So yeah. Yeah, unless you have to have some really good reason to do it the other way around, and I don't see it. I just don't see it. Each defending infantry loss counts as 2. Each defending infantry loss counts as 2. Infantry is taking more damage? I don't know. Okay, so that's actually in the back of the cover. So this is the cover sheet. It's a nice, thicker, glossy cardstock. So it's not an actual card stock, but it's a very thick paper. So this makes good for a chart like this. This is something that, you know, if you get some smear on it, you could wipe it off. That is nice. Right. So still don't know what it looks like. But major differences, we can easily more tell the different kind of terrain here. They have been more clear about ground versus air movement. There's modification of the dice rolls, not whole different columns. You still don't have a notion of attacking certain units is harder. Defender fires first. Defender fires first. Defender fires first. So you're going to get into combat, and you're going to shoot back and forth at each other, it sounds like. So you've got a combat phase. We're taking to combat. But it says who may fire first. assault combat. Combat is conducted between adjacent opposing units. So as opposed to bombardment, which I'm looking for, assault rules, train effects, nuclear mortar fire. Now, see, they're saying combat and it's adjacent, but unlike the other, they had a rule section called bombardment, but I'm not seeing that bombardment here. Nuclear mortar fire. Train effects. Defender fires first. Defenders fire, apply losses on attacking forces before attackers fire. Now, in rough, it doesn't say defenders fire first. But the way this is written, this is like a section. It doesn't say if this applies, if the defenders fires first effect applies from your terrain, do otherwise the attackers fire first? I'm having a problem resolving that. So this is still not as clear as it should be for a game that was rewritten from the original publication. When resolving assault combat, first the defending stack fire on the attacking stacks, then the attacking stacks fire on the defending stacks. Depending on the terrain, the losses will be applied before the attacker fires or after. Okay, so you always roll the defenders first and then the attackers. So this is this is misstated. It's not that defender fires first. Defender first fire. It's that the effect of the defender rolling first is applied first. So I would have selected a slightly different turn or something. You always roll the defender first, but in normal combat, you apply the losses. Yes, depending on the terrain, the losses will be applied before the attacker fires or after both have fired. So after both have fired, it's like you roll the results and then apply the results. Or if you have this defender first fire, means not fire first, but you always roll first, but applied first. All right. So again, choice of words. I may be nitpicking, but no, there was a potential for misunderstanding here. All right. Losses are in eliminated units. So this means you could actually, in this version, have one unit kill 4 enemy units. You could have 4 guys in a stack. And if it's in that crater plane in the middle, where you can get -2 to your attackers and defender rolls. And, so obviously they want to be in a building. The defenders want to be in the crater plane in a building. So this is the question. Crater plane. These things are in a crater plane, but they're also in a building. Do you apply this and this? To include other terrain. There's no, so because buildings can be outside, other terrain. These, yes. So the depot, which has defender first fire, are out in the rough, which has no effect on combat. But the colonies are in the crater plane where you get -2 on your roll. The defender will get to shoot first with -2 on their roll. They might roll bad enough, they don't kill anything. So for example, if you have 12 strength points and you roll boxcars, for example, you roll 12 with your -2, you use a 10, it's no hit. And then the other guy shoots back at you. And he has got one guy with a 10. So well, let's see, that's the Space Marine. So, yeah, let's say it's a scenario where the Russians have captured base and the Marines are counterattacking. They have 1 10 strength Marine. He could roll Snake Eyes, subtract 2, and kill two enemies. If you had 20 strength points stacked up, or you're attacking, not necessarily you're stacked up, but you could kill up to 3 on an attack. So you can kill more if you roll really well. You might just kill 1. Defending on the crater wall. By defending on the crater wall, the attacker has to add 2 to his dice roll. And the defender gets to fire first. So you definitely want to try to defend at the crater walls. And then once they get into the crater plane, it becomes very deadly. Both sides are getting a minus, but the defender wants to be staying in the buildings, at least the depots or colonies, so that they get to shoot first with their bonus to minus. Remember, it's a negative number bonus. More chance that they're going to kill 1 or more units, depending on what they're shooting at, how they're shooting. But it's no more of this rolling for each unit, trying to hit and maybe needing Snake Eyes or a 3 or having no chance. A total one of those buckets of dice fest with a really low chance to hit. Oh my God, this game must have been so boring in its original, or, the weird cat and mouse game of how to get your nuclear mortars stacked up to hit stacks of guys and have them not hit you. And the fact that you're combating first and then that must have been one crazy thing. Probably worth trying to play it once just to see the difference. But this does look much more clean, this version here. Still have to figure out the implications of, how much units you stack. I can't remember what's the stacking. Is it 3 or 4 or something like that? Movement, stacking. No more than 3 units may occupy hex. Self-propelled batteries and landing crafts are an exception. They may stack 1 over this to 4 maximum, regardless of the number of SPBs or LCs. So there could be 3 other units in one of those, or you could have 4 SPBs or whatever. Okay, here they've defined it carefully here. Units with a movement allowance of 10 are airborne. Units with a level of 4 or 2 are ground units. Ground and air movement rates are listed. Militia units with a movement of 2 can enter adjacent crater wall hex. Granted, this is the limit of its movement. Adjacent crater wall hex. Okay, so there's that minimum. You can move a minimum 1 because the cost to enter a crater wall for ground is 3, and they're saying militia. So now, did we see militia here? Did we see 2s? Here, militia. All right, so they have a 3 in parenthesis, a 3 or a 2 strength, 2 movements. Some have 4, but it's in parenthesis. Now, normally these guys don't have a range, so I am guessing that number, they can only shoot back in defense. They can't actually initiate an attack. That's my guess. So let's find militia. Now, I'm assuming the militia are on the American side, that they're, the scientists in the base or whatnot, they're calling up 4th Militia. American player has a militia formation. After the first day, if the player may mobilize militia units, may not be connected on day 1 or the first 6 turns of the campaign game. Sorry, each turn was about 4.5 hours, something like that, I think it said. So, first day, 6 turns, 21. All right, so militia, does it say here? Militia, 7.2. Try to zoom in so you can actually maybe read that along with me. Blah, blah, blah. Standard mobilizing. include the, oh, so you grab them at random. So there's 5 no militia counters. This is no militia. You take all the green guys, you put them in a pool. Militia does not return to the pool. Include the 5 militias picked. So when you recruit, you draw from the pool. You don't know how strong you're getting, and it might be, sorry, no militia this time. But it does not explain there that parenthesis combat. Well, let's see. Does it show here? Self-propelled batteries. 10 for defensive. 2 loss counts as. Oh, wait a minute. So this means you can absorb 2 losses by using a self-propelled battery. Oh, laser rifles always fire first. Now, it always fires first, always resolve first. Again, I'm having a problem with that. Wait a minute, this just said 7.2. They really meant, oh, there's militia. So maybe defensive fire only. Okay. This font's a little small, guys. This font is a little small. Look at all this white space here. Make the font bigger. You can do it. I'm sorry. My old eyes do not like small fonts. This whole thing can still fit. There's enough white space. You can make it a little bigger. I mean, I can read this, but it still would be a little nicer. Be a little bigger. But there, 7.3 laser rifle. Always fires first. First fire on attack and defense. Okay. Laser rifles fire first. They resolve first. Attack and defense with the exception of attacking units in a defender fire first situation, which is simultaneously. So in other words, normally you're shooting simultaneously. If you got a laser rifle, you shoot first. Subtract enemy losses, then they shoot back. Now, when you're attacking a building, the depots and the colonies, the defender gets to shoot first and subtract those losses, then you shoot back. But if it's the case where it's laser rifle attacking against the units in those buildings, since they both have this advantage of shooting first, it would be simultaneous between them. So if there was a mix of non-laser and other guys, you do the laser and the defenders in the building, they would shoot and subtract losses, and then, but see, how do you, what do you do? Because you're supposed to be adding up. Can they not shoot together? Or if you wanted to shoot together, you'd have to shoot at the speed of the slowest dude. Units stacked with laser rifles must fire individually if they do not gain the same fire priority. There you go. So you'd have the laser rifle guys shoot first, and then the other guys would shoot. And if it was also defensive, yeah. So okay, a little bit complicated there. All right, so there's other rules. We're not going to go. We've already gone over an hour, way more than I wanted to. Compared to contrast, I wanted to keep these to 45 minutes, but we've dug in. So if you have the old Moon Base Clavius, you get the new, improved Clavius version. Here are ways to update the old version. It's going to be slightly different than the new version, but a way to update it and have stuff. And I suppose you might be able to download this by itself, maybe. Radical change in the new one, in that it is move, then fire. You also do not roll to hit against each individual target. You're rolling an attack strength with 1 dice with a potential plus or minus. There's also a modification of who gets to shoot. So in any combat phase, you know, your phasing player is initiating attacks, but wherever they're attacking, they're shooting back. All right? And that could be painfully shooting first if you're attacking those main buildings. All right? So this sounds much more tactically interesting. The new version just had a few minor nitpickiness about, you know, the names of what this is called. Defender First Fire. Yes, apply the result first. I believe like in Magic the Gathering, they have a first strike as an attribute. Something like that, of course, you know. Lord knows you don't want to use a term that Magic the Gathering has used. They might sue you, or like, you know, tap. I'm like, oh, you can't call it tapping the card. Anyway, ramble. So in general, I like it. A few minor pet peeves. I would rather have seen bonuses be a plus instead of a minus, and vice versa. But it sounds like the game is much better than the original. There's more stuff going on, which, you know, some of it might be optional. I think the oxygen depletion was optional in the original one, and you could use that or not. There's militia. There's actually some space destroyers, the landing craft, so it's a little more interesting stuff. Actually got a little bit of actual Russian Cyrillic stuff there. So this was Meandering Mike in the Man Cave of Madness, doing a compare and contrast between the original, I'm going to zoom out here, Moon Base Clavius Task Force Games. If you can get it for cheap, it still might be worth getting for part of your collection. If you're a completist, if you got to have all the stuff, or if you like to do like I do and compare different games, I'll play this at least once to see how that combat then move works. And with that, you know, dividing the strength across the dudes and the nuclear mortars versus regular mortars and all that weird stuff. Looking to see if, yeah, I don't see any regular mortars in the new one. There's nuclear mortars and there's the self-propelled batteries, but there's no just regular mortars anymore, because the difference was, you know, does it divide or not, and that's, the combat's being resolved differently. So yeah, I'll give this a try at least once. And not once per scenario. I don't think this would be worth trying once per scenario. I maybe two different scenarios to see, you know, hey, the Russians on the attack versus the Russians on defense or something. I don't know. But this looks more interesting, and I bet the scenarios were probably more well thought out because the designer had the time to do it the way he wanted to do it, and probably test it more and not be rushed by someone else's production schedule. You know, publishers got to get things out the door at a certain time to make money, and if you're self-publishing, you know, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for the love of the game, the design, and just getting your stuff out there, and you can, you know, take better time to do it the way you want to do it. So, scenario. Yeah. Designer notes. Yes, the first edition was, I'm going to zoom in a little better there so you can see that too, was a significant departure from the original design as the developer reversed the sequence of play and changed the combat system. That said, the game was designed in my youth, and there are a number of things that are unrealistic considering the game's scale, especially the stacking and zone of control of the rules. On the other hand, the original game was a real player right to the end. So that rather than redesign the game, I have chosen to republish the original game with just a few adjustments. All right, so we're going to call it quits there, folks, as we tend to ramble on and ramble on. I do not remember how much the Clavius was. Whether it was 30 or 40 bucks. You can order it straight from Kerry Anderson. Well, I guess it's the micro design website. I believe it included postage, I think. So it was like 30 or 40 bucks, which you know, it's like, wow, there's not a lot to this here, but it's like, you know, you got two map sections and color, decent paper. You've got, you know, I'm not sure how many counters that is. 6, 9, 10. That's 240 counters versus the original 108. You got, you know, a nice cover here. Let's see, actually the way I would do this, I was going to put, so this part of the map would show out the back. You don't really want to see me reassemble everything here to put back in the Ziploc, I'm sure. But looking at the form factor here, again, it was not even a Ziploc. It came in a, I don't know, I may not have ordered this. I might have got this off of Noble Knight Games. I know I have ordered some stuff from, you don't want to see me do that. I'll tuck that in there and fight with that later. So, Moon Base Clavius, Task Force Games, 1982. Kerry Anderson, copyright 2014. I don't know if this particular version in this format was 2014, but close enough. 108 counters, 240, I think I said, yeah, 20, 12, yeah, 120 per side, 240, right, 240. Pretty bland map, pretty decent map, which is basically 99% the same map, but you know, better graphics, slightly larger hexes, maybe by a tiny fraction. I don't know. So, if you are interested in these, like I said, you can get those. Well, this one now. This one should probably not be hard to find. So Kerry Anderson. So, wow, 1 hour and 17 minutes. That's 77 minutes. So, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you for watching another segment of my Compare and Contrast, where we compare games by different designers or different versions of the same game, or plans to do more where we'll compare games on the same battle but by different designers and try to see, you know, what their different approaches, things like that. So over time, we'll try to do at least one Compare-Trast a month, I think, is a good goal for that. So all you good folks out there, take care and ciao.